Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
I hope everybody's well. Let's go ahead and pray and let's get started on our discourse here. Daniel chapter 11, I'm sorry, part 6. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for your truth. Thank you, Lord, that we can understand it, given that we can study it and know it and be clear about your plan, your desire for the future in regards to these two particular regions, Israel and Babylon. I pray, God, that this would be profitable, this would be beneficial, and that you would be acknowledged and recognized throughout this discourse. For it's in your Son's name. Amen. Um, you know, working through this text, that is the whole of Daniel, particularly chapter 11, um, really gives me some apprehension because there's a lot of history here, right? And I don't know about you, but I don't read about Alexander the Great every day, um, and about all of these individuals that are being brought up, and so I kind of feel as if for a person coming in brand new to this teaching who has not had their skids greased, right? This could be very overwhelming for a particular person who comes in. Just you feel like you might be drinking through about 2 or 3 fire hydrants. Um, so hopefully I'm able to communicate these things as clear and as concise as I possibly can, so that you, as the listener, particularly if you have heard this for the first time, that you won't get overwhelmed. That's kind of my goal here. So if I keep repeating things twice or 3 times and stuff like that, and it seems like I'm doing that a lot, that's on purpose, because I want you guys to track with me, and in light of the information that's being presented, because we don't really dive into this a whole lot. Okay, enough of those caveats. Let's go ahead and jump into where we are in the timeline of Daniel. We are here 559 to 529 BC at the start of Cyrus the Great's rule. Darius the Mede is the co-regent, or the kind of the co-ruler over Babylon right now at this particular time. Daniel has spent about 21 days fasting and praying for Israel. He has seen essentially the decree of Cyrus that Israel has gone back to their land. They're beginning to do that. They're beginning to start to get all of this equipment, all of these materials to not only build Jerusalem, but to begin to build the temple as well. And Daniel has decided to remain in Babylon for the remainder of his life. He will pass on there. As he is praying and interceding for Israel and wondering about them and their overall destiny, uh, a a divine messenger appears to Daniel to give him a message essentially about the history of Israel, of his people. Okay? That was chapter 10. Chapter 11 and 12 is the detailing of that history, and how it relates to the kingdom rulers, of the Gentile rulers of the time. We have been tracking, essentially starting off with Alexander the Great and the Grecian Empire, the start of that Grecian Empire. Daniel will not live to see this empire. He will pass on in the mid of the Persian Empire. But Daniel is given information about the Grecian Empire and the Hellenistic rule, starting with Alexander the Great and his gigantic, massive kingdom. He will not rule for that long. Alexander won't. He will die in 323 BC, and it will be divided amongst his 4 generals, known as the Diadochi, okay, or the successors. These successors are these 4 individuals here who rule certain regions of Alexander the Great's real estate after he dies. Again, we have Seleucus, who's the ruler of the east, Ptolemy, who's the ruler of the south, Cassander, the ruler of the west, and Antigonus, the ruler of the north. Well, because of them jockeying for positions of power and things like that, Seleucus ends up taking over Antigonus and becomes the ruler of the north. Cassander ends up being taken over by someone else, and so his reign kind of ends. And then we have Ptolemy here, which is the ruler of the south, which is Egypt. The chapter 11, and I would say subsequently 12, focus on these 2 areas. The ruler of the north, which is again Syria, Turkey, that particular region, and then Ptolemy, the ruler of the south, which is Egypt. This is the focus of chapter 11. We have been following these particular kings from both of these regions. Remember, ruler of the south, or king of the north, and king of the south is a title. Okay, so as soon as one king dies and the other king takes its place, he takes on that title. Okay, that's how this works. And we've been tracking essentially the details like a forensic investigator, looking at words and phrases and details and all of these things to kind of piece together historically when this took place in history. We have gotten all the way to essentially verse 20 of this text here. We ended last week on verse 19 with Antiochus III, the Great. Let's review, and then we'll go into verse 20 here. It says, this one man, that is this certain man, this angelic being, this divine messenger who's come to Daniel, is telling Daniel this from the perspective of this letter. Okay? He is describing the back and forth conflict between Antiochus III, that is the king of the north, and his massive influence and power. Antiochus III essentially has set the stage for the deterioration of the Seleucid Empire, the king of the north. He's going to be responsible for that. His actions and ultimate end, again, sets up some of the preceding events that happened in the known world at large. Okay? So Antiochus III is kind of at fault here for kind of the downfall of the Seleucid Empire. Let's continue here with this text. Daniel chapter 11, verse 20. I'll read, then in his place, one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of the kingdom, or his kingdom. Yet within a few days he will be shattered, though not in anger or in battle. As you can see these words in red here, for those who do not know or are not aware of why I highlight these words in red, I believe that these are important words to underscore here within this text to kind of understand what is going on here. Let's look at let's look at these words in red here. The word arise is the Hebrew word amad. Amad. This word occurs over 500 times in the Hebrew scriptures and 46 times in the book of Daniel. We've seen this word or this phrase, although I have not highlighted it in certain places. This word has appeared in many places in Daniel, particularly in the Hebrew sections. It means either to stood or to stand, to raise up or to set in place something. So it could literally mean to physically stand, or it could mean someone who appears on the scene, someone who shows up. Okay? In this context, that would seem to be the case, that one is going to appear after Antiochus III the Great. And this person who will arise will send an oppressor. Nagas is the Hebrew phrase here for this text. This word occurs 23 times in the Hebrew scriptures and only once here in Daniel. So this is a very unique word or phrase that appears here. The word could be translated that one who is who oppresses or a taskmaster. So this individual is a person who demands or places undue pressure on either the subjects or the citizens that they are governing over, or the person who is being sent by that individual who is being governed over, to put pressure on these individuals. Now, this is an interesting statement here. He says he will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom. This word jewel is the word cheder. Ironically, this phrase is the only time that this occurs. It doesn't occur anywhere else in the Hebrew scriptures. So again, this is a unique word. The word actually means, it doesn't mean jewel, but it actually means glory, splendor, adornment, something majestic, something regal. Okay? Actually, the root word for this word, heder, is hadar, which means honor or majestic. So again, something resplendent, something regal. Okay? So this individual who appears on the scene, it seems, will send a person who will put undue pressure on the most valuable or precious part of this individual's kingdom. That's kind of the idea here. And this jewel is very specific. This majestic region that we're talking about is very specific. This is an area, geographically speaking. So let's break down again the statement 20 here. So one will appear from the king of the north. This is after Antiochus. This one who arises or appears will send a person who will oppress the majestic or the jewel of the kingdom of the one who arises. And the one who arises, again, will ultimately be broken or shattered. But what this is interesting, he won't, this person who is shattered won't be shattered in war. They will not be shattered in battle. But they'll be broken in some way, shape, or form. Well, who could this be talking about? Well, the one who comes after Antiochus III the Great is an individual by the name of Seleucus IV. Philopator is his name, Seleucus IV. So after the death of Antiochus III, since we are talking about him, we need to do a case study on him. So after the death of Antiochus III, his son, this is Seleucus IV, his son, takes his place as the ruler of Egypt. This is Daniel 11:20 right here. So right after the death of Antiochus III, Seleucus IV takes his place. Okay? Although his kingdom was the size of his father, again, Seleucus's rule included areas like Syria, Sicilia, Israel. Again, I find it very fascinating. Every time I go on these websites and look at this history, they refer to Israel as Palestine. Why are they referring to it as Palestine? Particularly during this particular time. Mesopotamia, Babylonia, the region of Babylonia, which includes Babylon and Media Persia. This is his rule over all of this. Now remember, Antiochus III had a little bit of financial difficulties, right? He was defeated by Rome, right? Remember, his fleet was destroyed. His naval fleet was destroyed. They took away the Tartarus Mountains, which was a strategic position right up near Turkey, right? And they charged him $9 million. Remember that? It was like 12,000 talents over the course of 12 years that they had to collect, right? So they basically bankrupted the Seleucid Empire. They could not build an army. They could not build any armaments. They couldn't do anything, right? Because they were giving all of their money to Rome. Not only that, Rome had asked for hostages, right, to keep him in check. So the kingdom under Philopator's rule had huge financial difficulties, right, because they were trying to exact these taxes for Rome. This financial difficulty was created by the treaty his father agreed to from the Roman Empire, the Treaty of Armenia. Okay. Rome was like, look, you give us money, we won't destroy you. How about that? You like that deal? Or you, even if you don't like it, you're going to take it anyway, right? So his son was tasked with essentially raising money for these funds to send back to Rome, right? That was basically his whole entire rule, right? So in an effort to raise funds for this debt, Seleucus IV commands his officer Heliodorus to Jerusalem to exact taxes. But actually, to be honest with you, he sent Heliodorus to essentially rob the temple. That's basically what he did. Okay. Now, notice again in chapter 11, verse 20, he will send an oppressor to the jewel of his kingdom. If we are to underscore this, that the jewel of his kingdom is more than likely Jerusalem. The oppressor in this text is Heliodorus. The one who appears is Seleucus IV. Seleucus could not do much in his kingdom because you don't have any money, right? If you don't have any money, you can't really do much. So he couldn't conquer lands either. Because not only did he not have any money, but his family members were being held hostage in Rome. So if he decided that he was going to go conquer some lands, all they had to do was just kill the progeny, done with, right? Over. So Heliodorus' mission eventually was to exact treasures from the temple in Jerusalem. It was rumored that the temple in Jerusalem had some of their riches, right, which could go back to Cyrus the Great and all of that stuff. So his goal was to exact treasures from the temple, basically to rob it. The reason for this action was a high temple priest denounced the Jews before Apollonius. So there was a high priest who denied or denounced the Jewish people, which was kind of terrible. Who was a commander of the Syrian army. So this high priest who denounced this Jew went to the commander of the Syrian army and said, "Hey, we have some of your treasures in our temple. You might want to come and get some of this," right? And so that's why Heliodorus was sent. However, it was observed that Heliodorus was unsuccessful. So he went down to exact these taxes and try to rob the temple, but he was unsuccessful in exacting these treasures. Now, what's interesting is some extra biblical sources actually underscore this historical account. We find this in 2nd Maccabees. But it's also underscored in Daniel 11:20. It's implied here. Okay. So Heliodorus was unsuccessful. Seleucus IV Philopator, who is essentially a weak king. He is a weak king. Okay. Ultimately, and ironically, Seleucus IV was assassinated by the person whom he sent to exact taxes. So it could be that this Heliodorus said, look, this guy's weak, man. He's about as, this guy's weak, man. I think I could do a better job in running this place than he does. So he probably had him assassinated. It wasn't in battle. It wasn't in war that he died. He was assassinated, which also underscores statement 20 of the one man here in this text speaking to Daniel. So we are here. So Seleucus V, again, his reign was not that long either. And again, he could not really do much in his kingdom because of the fact that he was overwhelmed with debt that was basically given by Rome. Okay. Now, I have to take a little not a detour, but I have to issue a little note here, considering the preceding verses here, and particularly verses 21 to 32. So just like there is, you remember in the previous verses from, I believe, verses 12 to 19, right? There was a focus on one king, and then there was kind of an overlap between one king and then all these other various kings that appear. If you're not really aware of that, you can go back and take a look at those videos. But it seems like there's going to be another one of these here. So from verses 21 to 32, there's a focus on two other kings, two other rulers discussed in this account. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who represents the king of the north, and Ptolemy VI, okay, which is the king of the south. Chapter 11, 21 to 32 focuses on the interaction between these two rulers, and it will go back and forth between the two. Okay. So let's go ahead and pick this up here. Daniel chapter 11, verse 21. It says this: in his place, a despicable person will arise, on whom the honor of the kingship has not been conferred, but he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. Interesting here. Let's take a look at a couple of words here that are in red, which give us which highlight some things here. Despicable is the Hebrew word bazar. This phrase occurs 43 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is meant to be made as despisable or contemptible, just an awful human being. Okay? This word only occurs once in the book of Daniel here, only here in this text. So again, it's one of those unique words, right? This word in this quality doesn't necessarily underscore the actions of the person, okay? That his actions are despicable, but that his character is despicable. This word underscores a vile person. He's just disgusting, okay? So his actions throughout this particular passage here will highlight this. It will highlight the character of this individual. Because he does these things, he is a despicable person. By the way, it's not that all of the other rulers have been like honorable in their actions up to this point either. I mean, they've been double crossing, triple crossing everybody and stuff like that, backstabbing, marrying their own sisters. It's crazy, right? There's something very unique about this individual that makes him a vile person above all the other ones that we've just looked at. Okay, let's continue here. The word tranquility in this text is shabal. This word occurs 8 times in the Hebrew scriptures, 3 times in the book of Daniel, that is in chapters 11 and 12, and it underscores prosperity, peace, a time of without hostility. So it's a state of calmness. There are no wars going on right now. Again, we've been reading through chapter 11. There's been battles and wars going on over lands and seizing of lands and territory. This despicable, vile person, it seems, will arise during a time when there is no hostility at all. There are no wars going on. Okay? And it says during this time, in verse 21, he will seize the kingdom by intrigue. So this individual will seize the kingdom by intrigue. What is this? Kahalakwa is the Hebrew word. That's a lot. It's a lot, man. It doesn't even look like it's pronounceable, but it is. Kahalakwa is the Hebrew word. 4 times it occurs in the Hebrew scriptures. 2 times it occurs in the book of Daniel. This comes from the root word to divide, to split. Now, what do we mean by intrigue? How does he divide or split? Well, in this context here, when it's talking about that he will seize the kingdom by intrigue, this means that he has an attitude to smooth talk people. Oh, he smooth talks with flattery. He'll make you think that we're allies. You know, all I want is peace. Yeah, he wants a piece of this land and that land and this land, right? He wants all the pieces, right? So he will make alliances and flatter the people who he makes alliances with, thinking that, oh man, this person is with me. And then at the right moment, he will stab them in the back. That's how he does it. So in the place of the king of the north, another person will arise or will appear, and the honor and the respect of kingly rule has not been recognized. He does not have the authority to be a king or a ruler, but yet he will take it. He will take it by intrigue. And during this time of ease, there is no wars going on, which would make sense because he's still in debt. The kingdom's still in debt. They can't go to battle for anybody, right? Rome is still exacting taxes from the king of the north. They can't advance any lands at all, right? So this is a time of great tranquility or calmness, rather. And yet within the calmness, there's some maneuvering going on. Well, who's the next on the list here? After Seleucus IV. The next person on the list is Antiochus IV, Epiphanes. What a name. We'll talk about that in a minute, because I believe this text underscores how he thought of himself. So after the assassination of Seleucus IV, Demetrius should actually be the ruler to take the place of Seleucus IV. But Demetrius is held hostage in Rome. Okay, he's preoccupied at the moment. Okay, so Heliodorus attempts to take control of the throne by way of Antiochus IV. Both of them actually don't belong on the throne at all. Okay, Heliodorus he's not even part of lineage, so he is the minister of the king. So he decides he wants to take over. But when he decides to take the throne, Antiochus sees his opportunity and ousts Heliodorus. So Antiochus IV takes possession of the Seleucid throne, that is the throne of the king of the north, which belonged to Demetrius. Remember, we talked about Demetrius. He's up in Rome. He's unavailable. Okay. After this move, he proclaims himself to be king. It is not given to him. He doesn't have this authority. He just sits on the throne and says, well, I guess I'm it, right? Yay me. This is underscored in verse 21 of Daniel. So Antiochus IV, because he thinks so low of himself, he decides to take on the name. He names himself. Okay. So there were, usually when they have these titles, Antiochus IV, Philopator, Antiochus IV, all of these, it's usually the people that recognize this individual, right? Antiochus III the Great, that's what they called him. Okay. But he decides to call himself Epiphanius. And he took on this phrase with the word theos, meaning God. Ain't that something? So he essentially says that he's God manifest. That's how he thought of himself. Okay? Self-aggrandizing, right? So he's the greatest thing. The sun doesn't rise until he wakes up, apparently. So that's how he thought of himself. Let's read verse 11, chapter 11, verse 22 here. The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant. What does this mean here? That the overflowing forces will be flooded away in his sight and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant. Well, what is covenant? Covenant is berith. It occurs 284 times in the Hebrew scriptures. And it's translated covenant. It's essentially an agreement between two parties, and it could apply to human beings or God, as we see throughout the Hebrew scriptures. In this sense, this word is used within the context to talk about a ruler. The prince of the covenant, that's that word there, prince. A ruler or the custodian of the covenant. That is the Mosaic covenant. That's kind of what's going on here. So other forces will be swept away or flooded before him, as we see the details of the statement before him, and they will be shattered or broken to pieces. And the one who is in place of the king of the north, the one that doesn't have authority, will also be with what the custodian of the covenant. What does that mean? Well, let's look at some more details of Antiochus's Epiphanes' history. So in 173 AD, did you know that Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, paid the debt to Rome in full? He paid it all. Through means of heavy taxation. He just taxed people to oblivion. That's basically what he did. So much so that he was able to pay the debt to Rome in full. Okay? Antiochus IV also attempted to assert dominance over the region of Israel. So remember, the kings back then had a real good relationship with Israel. Hey, you pay tribute to us, we'll leave you alone, right? There was maybe a couple of them that came in exact taxes, like the king before. But other than that, all of the kings up to this point really had a real good relationship with Israel. Some of them even lived in Egypt, right? Not so with Antiochus IV. Antiochus, in an attempt to assert dominance over the region of Israel, also conquered and broke the Jewish high priest. He basically had him removed from the position of the high priest, whose name was Onias III. Okay? So he was basically making the move to essentially assert dominance over Israel by taking Onias, who was against Antiochus IV, to replace him with someone a little bit more favorable towards him. That's the idea. He removed the opposition. In verse 23, we read, after an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception, and he will go and gain power with a small force of people. So after he removes Onias III, okay, he essentially turns his direction towards Egypt and begins to start a relationship with Ptolemy VI, who was a young ruler at this time. Okay? He wanted the return of Kol Syria to Egypt, that is, those coastlands that are on the coast of Turkey. He wanted those to Egypt. He wanted to take those back. Well, Antiochus said, no, I don't think so. So Antiochus defeats the Egyptian army and captures Ptolemy VI. So there's a little bit of a battle between them, and Antiochus captures Ptolemy VI. However, like when you capture a king, right, or any king, you dispose them, right, and you become the ruler. However, what he does is very shrewd. He conquers him, but allows him to remain king in Egypt, possibly not to give any red flags to Rome, right? Because if Rome finds out what he's doing, he's a dead man, right? So he says, yeah, I conquered you, but here, you stay on the throne. You stay on the throne, and we'll have a great relationship, right? I already did this one. So the king of the south essentially creates an alliance, kind of a soft agreement, right, with the king of the north. That is verse 23. That after an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception. So how does he practice deception? The king of the north will exhibit deception and will eventually gain influence with a small group of people. What does this mean? Well, let's go ahead and read verse 24, because I believe this gives us some clarity as to basically what this means. So in a time of tranquility, he will enter the richest parts of the realm, and he will accomplish what his fathers never did. Oh, Mr. Despicable. Nor his ancestors, and he will distribute plunder, booty, and possessions among them, and he will devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time. What a vile person this is. Let's talk about what he does here, looking at the details. So in the time of ease, tranquility, again, there's no major wars going on, maybe a couple skirmishes here and there, but there's no major battles for any type of land at all, okay? And that would make sense because, again, he doesn't want to get on Rome's radar. So what does he do? He goes into his own province and begins to steal resources from his own people. Which, I mean, he's already done that through exact taxes, but he's going to go into his wealthiest parts of his own kingdom and just take resources from the people, from his subjects, and exacting heavy taxes. I mean, he's basically putting all of this in his coffers. It says the king of the north will complete what his descendants never did. Well, what does his descendants never do? Well, usually if you wanted to conquer a land, you build an army and you take it over, right? That's what his ancestors did. But he doesn't do that. Instead, what he does is he takes all the wealth that he's collected, that he's stolen really, from all of these people, and he begins to pass it to other people from other lands. Hey, I'll give you this amount of money if you give me this. Hey, I'll give you this amount of money if you give me this. Hey, I'll give you this. I'll give you this treasure here. Okay. So during this time of peace, quote unquote, between Antiochus and Ptolemy, which really isn't, he sought to pillage his own realm for their riches and treasures. This actually happened. I actually read this. Right? And of course, this created hostility between the king and his citizens under his influence. I mean, you want somebody coming down in your house like gangbusters stealing your stuff, right? This is underscored in verse 24. So instead of using his riches to grow and boost his own influence, build an army, construct a fleet, things like that, he bribes and influences leaders of other lands, thereby essentially expanding his power. So he doesn't take it over by force. He takes it over by bribery, right? Here, I'll give you this. I'll give you these treasures. You let me exact some influence over you. The objective was to take control of Egypt. That was his goal. So he left Ptolemy VI there as kind of like a dummy king. So Rome wouldn't get suspicious. And at the same time, he's working through intrigue, building his influence, because he's going to amass an army to essentially seize Egypt and possibly take on Rome. That is his goal. Okay? So from verses 21 to 24 so far, we have looked at Antiochus IV, Epiphanes. And of course, within that particular line, we see Ptolemy VI as well in Daniel 11, verse 23. Okay? Our list is getting longer here. I had to move this down here, right? It's getting longer. We'll probably end up expanding this a couple more times here. So to sum up here, ending our history lesson for this morning. Remember, Daniel is being told this information. He will not see any of this happening. But this information that he has been given concerns Israel, which is in the middle of this back and forth conflict between the king of the north and king of the south. And we see that Israel plays prominently concerning some of their high priests, concerning them siding with some of these individuals to try to take this over, to fulfill the vision of them being liberated. Things like that. So the back and forth conflict is being described here. Now we can look back, of course, and see all of this play out, but Daniel is being told this in advance, again, to underscore and highlight the ultimate destiny of not only the Gentiles, but his very own people, is the Israelites. There's still I told you we're going to be in this chapter for a while, because there's a whole lot of stuff that we have to cover. There's a lot of history here, lots of small case studies with all of these rulers and how they maneuvered and things like that. And yet we find that the one man talking to Daniel has given them all of this information. What a wonderful, wonderful text that we can look at and unpack here. We'll be in here for a while still. Let's go ahead and pray. And then we will close out this lesson. Lord, I thank you so much that the details here are so specific, that there is no way that this can be by human design. This cannot be just created pell-mell in the minds of men, that you have chosen by this one man that is speaking to Daniel to give the history of Israel. And how it parallels with the history of these rulers, these empires, all of these things, and how it coalesces at the end. I thank you, Lord, for this information, that we can think about it, we can believe it, and look forward to the ultimate end, to where your kingdom will be established. For it's in your Son's name. Amen.